My name is Mia Rose. I am 34 years old. I once believed my life was a fairy tale. Patrick and I met in the most ordinary way, yet to me it felt extraordinary. I had walked into a small bookstore on a rainy afternoon, clutching my umbrella against the wind. He was there, standing in the aisle of biographies, tall and confident, his hair damp from the storm. He smiled at me, asked about the book I picked up, and in that instant I felt as though the world had shifted. That was 8 years ago, and from that day forward I thought fate had handed me my happily ever after. Our marriage began with laughter and promise. Patrick loved to surprise me with spontaneous weekend trips to the coast, dinners at candlelit restaurants, or even just coffee in bed on quiet Sunday mornings. He had a way of making me feel like I was the center of his universe. I wore his devotion proudly, as though it were jewelry no one else could afford. Friends often said we looked like the perfect couple, and I believed them. I truly did. We bought a house in the suburbs, a white-painted colonial with navy shutters and a wide porch that looked like something out of a magazine. I decorated every corner, and Patrick worked tirelessly to provide. He had a good job in finance, and I taught art at a local community center. Together, we made enough to live comfortably. The house was filled with warmth, laughter, and dreams. I imagined children's voices echoing through the halls one day, maybe a dog running through the yard, and a future built on stability and love. Yet even in that bliss, there were cracks. They were so faint at first, I convinced myself I was imagining them. Patrick sometimes grew restless when life slowed down, when the excitement faded into routine. He thrived on attention, on admiration, and when the focus shifted away from him, he became short-tempered. At dinner parties with friends, I would see the way his eyes wandered when conversations weren't about him. He needed validation like oxygen. Till I brushed it off, believing his flaws were simply part of what made him human. There were moments when I noticed his affection dimmed if I wasn't at my best. If I came home tired, hair undone, mood heavy from the day, his warmth cooled. He liked me radiant, glowing, laughing. It was as if my worth in his eyes was tied to how effortlessly I could play the part of the charming wife. But I was in love, and love, I thought, required forgiveness, patience, and the willingness to ignore what didn't fit into the picture you painted of your life. Our friends adored us as a couple. Jasmine, my closest friend since college, used to joke that Patrick set the bar too high for the men she dated. "You've got the dream husband," she'd tease, sipping wine at my kitchen table while Patrick grilled steaks in the backyard. I'd laugh, nod, and feel a flush of pride. She didn't see the way he sometimes dismissed my opinions with a wave of his hand, or how quickly his voice sharpened if I disagreed with him in front of others. Those things I kept hidden even from her. Holidays were our stage. Patrick loved the show of being the perfect husband, buying me expensive jewelry for Christmas, whisking me away to Aspen for New Year's, surprising me with flowers on Valentine's Day. I delighted in those moments, yet deep inside I knew his gestures were often more about appearances than genuine tenderness. I wondered if he would still love me if the sparkle faded, if life demanded something harder, rawer, less polished. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the trees, I asked him, "Do you ever think about the future, about what happens if life doesn't go as planned?" He chuckled, leaned back with his drink, and said, "Why think like that, Mia Rose? Life is about enjoying what's good while it lasts." I smiled, though something in his answer unsettled me. I wanted reassurance that love would endure through storms. What I got instead was a glimpse of his need for constant ease. Till I held on tightly. Patrick was my husband, my partner, my chosen one. I told myself love was not about testing but about believing. I ignored the doubts that stirred quietly at night when the house was still, convincing myself that his occasional coldness was nothing compared to the warmth we shared most of the time. Truth is, I built a castle in my mind where Patrick was my protector and our love unshakable. I believed if I loved him deeply enough, he would always return it, no matter the circumstances. I told myself stories of resilience and loyalty, promising silently that I would stand by him through anything. I assumed, no, I trusted, that he would do the same for me. But as I would later learn, trust built on illusions is fragile. Love that shines only in sunshine cannot endure the weight of shadows. And though I didn't yet know it, the test I once silently wished to avoid was already approaching. Life was about to strip away the glamour, the appearances, the effortless joy, and show me the truth about the man I had married. For now, though, I remained blind, nestled in the comfort of our seemingly perfect marriage. I had no idea how quickly perfection could unravel, or how love could be revealed as something conditional, fleeting, and cruel when confronted with real tragedy. It was a late autumn afternoon when my life changed forever. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and gray, the kind of evening that usually made me want to wrap myself in a blanket and sip tea by the window. But instead, I was behind the wheel, driving home after finishing up at the art center. The roads were slick with rain, headlights blurred into hazy ribbons, and I remember humming softly to a song on the radio. Then, in one terrible instant, the world spun out of control. A truck swerved suddenly from the opposite lane. I remember the sound first, a screech of tires, a metallic roar, glass shattering. Then pain. White, blinding pain that pulsed through my body before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling my lungs. My body felt foreign, heavy, unresponsive. Dr. Green leaned over me, her kind but cautious eyes meeting mine. "Mia Rose," she said gently, "you've been in an accident. You're lucky to be alive." I tried to move, but my legs didn't respond. Panic shot through me. Why can't I feel them?" My voice cracked. She hesitated, then spoke words that pierced like knives. "The injury to your spine? I'm afraid it's severe. We'll need more tests, but for now you won't be able to walk." I felt my world collapse. Everything I had taken for granted, dancing barefoot in the kitchen, morning jogs, even walking across our porch, was stolen in that moment. Fear swallowed me whole, but what I clung to was the thought of Patrick. Surely, he would hold me, tell me it didn't matter, remind me that love could carry us through anything. When he arrived, I reached for him desperately, tears streaming down my face. He held my hand, kissed my forehead, whispered, "It's okay, baby. We'll get through this." And for a brief moment, I believed him. But over the days that followed, I began to notice the shadows in his eyes. First, it was subtle. He stayed late at work more often, claiming there were deadlines. He avoided my gaze when nurses helped me with basic tasks. His touches grew mechanical, obligatory, as though kindness had turned into duty. The man who once adored my presence now seemed suffocated by it. I tried to stay positive, clinging to hope. Jasmine visited often, bringing flowers and laughter into the sterile room. She brushed my hair, told me stories, reminded me I was still me, even if my body had changed. "You're strong, Mia Rose," she'd say firmly, squeezing my hand. "This doesn't define you." Her words lit candles in my darkness, but when Patrick walked in, the light dimmed. One night, I overheard him on the phone in the hospital hallway. His voice was hushed, sharp with irritation. "I can't do this forever," he muttered. "She needs more than I can give. I didn't sign up for this." My chest tightened. The words were knives, confirming the fears I tried to smother. When I came home in a wheelchair weeks later, reality set in harder. Our beautiful colonial house, once filled with laughter, now echoed with silence. Porch steps became barriers. Kitchen counters felt out of reach. Patrick's patience thinned with every sigh, every rolled eye when I asked for help. One evening, I dropped a glass while trying to move it from the counter. It shattered across the tile and I froze, tears pricking my eyes. Patrick stormed in, his face twisted with annoyance. "For God's sake, Mia Rose, can't you be more careful?" His tone wasn't pity, it was resentment. I apologized over and over, my voice trembling, but he just shook his head and walked away. Nights became lonelier. He often stayed in the guest room, claiming he needed sleep. He stopped planning dinners, stopped making me feel like a woman, stopped seeing me as his partner. I had become a responsibility, a burden, a weight dragging him down. Till I tried. I asked him to talk, begged him to tell me what he was feeling. He avoided me with excuses, brushing off my questions. "You wouldn't understand," he'd mutter, retreating to his phone or the television. But I understood all too well. The man who once swore forever was unraveling before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The hardest moment came at a dinner party with friends. Determined to show life hadn't broken me, I dressed up, wheeled myself into the dining room with Patrick by my side. But instead of pride, I caught the flicker of embarrassment on his face as conversation shifted toward me. He avoided touching me, avoided even looking at me, and when Jasmine reached across the table to refill my glass, Patrick sighed loudly, muttering something about always needing attention. The shame that burned through me was unbearable. That night, as he drove us home in silence, I realized the truth. The accident had not only broken my body, it had exposed the fragility of his love. His devotion was never built to withstand storms. It was crafted for ease, for appearances, for sunshine. And now, with clouds overhead, his affection was slipping away like sand through my fingers. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into my hair. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my legs, I was grieving the loss of the man I thought I married. And though I didn't know it yet, the deepest wound was still to come. Patrick's love wasn't merely fading, it was preparing to vanish altogether. I should have seen it coming, yet when the moment arrived, it sliced through me with a brutality I hadn't anticipated. It was a cold February morning, snowflakes drifting past the windows, silence wrapping the house like a suffocating blanket. Patrick stood in the doorway of the living room, his face unreadable, a man rehearsing lines he had already decided to deliver. "Mia Rose," he said, his voice clipped, formal. "We need to talk." I felt my stomach knot. The words every spouse dreads. I set down the book I was pretending to read, bracing myself. He walked over, pulled a stack of papers from his leather briefcase, and placed them on the coffee table with a sharp thud. Divorce papers. For a moment, the world blurred. The black letters swam before my eyes, sentences twisting into daggers. "Patrick, what is this?" My voice was barely a whisper. His jaw tightened. "I can't do this anymore, Mia Rose. I'm not the kind of man who can handle this situation. It's not fair to either of us." "This situation?" I repeated, stunned. "You mean me? My body? My accident?" He looked away, shame flickering across his face, but it was quickly replaced with that cold detachment I had come to dread. "You've changed, everything has changed. I didn't marry you for this. You deserve someone who can be what you need." "And I deserve," he trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the room. He deserved more. More than a wife in a wheelchair. Tears came hot, uncontrollable. "After everything we've shared, this is how you end it? Like I'm a broken object you can discard?" He shifted uncomfortably, his tone sharpening. "Don't make this harder than it already is. I've spoken to Jonathan Davidson. He'll make sure the process is smooth." Jonathan Davidson. The lawyer who had once drawn up our will, the man I thought was there to protect us as a couple. Now he was the one holding the keys to dismantling my marriage. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers in his face, but my body betrayed me. My hands trembled too much, my legs were useless weights beneath me. I was trapped, powerless, watching my life unravel with every word Patrick spoke. He left me sitting there, shattered, and retreated upstairs as though the conversation were no more significant than deciding what to have for dinner. The cruelty wasn't only in the decision but in the ease with which he delivered it, as though he had been living without me long before the papers appeared. When Jasmine arrived later that day, she found me still clutching the documents, tears staining the pages. She knelt beside me, fury burning in her eyes. "He's a coward," she spat. "A selfish coward. You deserve so much better." She hugged me tightly, and for the first time in weeks I allowed myself to sob without restraint, my grief shaking both of us. In the days that followed, Patrick grew colder, detached, efficient. He spoke only when necessary, discussed logistics, finances, property division as though we were strangers negotiating a business deal. I listened, numb, nodding when required, my heart splintering further each time he avoided my gaze. What he didn't know, what no one but Jasmine knew, was that my life was not as barren as he believed. Years before, when my grandmother passed away, she had left me a quiet inheritance, $100,000. I had tucked it away, untouched, never mentioning it, not even to Patrick. It wasn't a fortune, but it was security, freedom, independence. And now, staring at those divorce papers, I made a decision. I would not tell him. If his love was true, he would have stayed even if I had nothing. But his love was conditional, fragile, performative. By concealing my inheritance, I was not only protecting myself, I was testing the man who claimed once to love me in sickness and in health. The irony gnawed at me. While he was discarding me as worthless, he was walking away from the very security he craved most in life. Patrick loved money, stability, prestige. He thought he was cutting ties with a burden. In truth, he was severing himself from everything he valued. When Jonathan Davidson called to go over the details, I sat quietly on the phone, letting him speak in his calm, practiced voice. Patrick wants this to be straightforward, Mia Rose. Of course you'll get the house for now, but he's requesting a clean break. I almost laughed. Clean break. As if betrayal could ever be clean. As if signing papers could erase the memories, the vows, the dreams built in every corner of our home. But I held my tongue because the secret inside me gave me strength. He thought he was winning. He had no idea he was losing more than he could imagine. The weeks stretched on and Patrick's absences grew longer. He stayed away most nights, leaving me in silence. But silence became my teacher. In that stillness, I realized something profound. I was not broken. My legs may have failed me, but my will had not. And while he abandoned me, I began piecing myself together in ways he would never understand. One evening, Jasmine helped me pack a few boxes of my belongings. "Why do this for him?" she asked. "You have the right to fight back, to demand more." I shook my head slowly. "No, Jasmine. Let him go. Let him think I'm helpless, penniless. Let him believe he's freed himself. The truth will come back to him eventually." Her eyes softened as she studied me. "You're stronger than you realize, Mia Rose." I didn't feel strong, not yet. But I knew this. I would not beg. I would not crawl. Patrick could not love me when life turned cruel, then he never truly loved me at all. When the divorce was finalized, I signed my name with steady hands. My heart ached, but my spirit was intact. Patrick walked away thinking he had traded a crippled wife for freedom. What he didn't know was that he had traded loyalty, wealth, and the chance at real love for nothing but emptiness. And someday soon, he would learn that truth the hard way. The silence after the divorce was both a wound and a relief. Patrick packed his things and left as though erasing me was the simplest task he had ever undertaken. The house felt cavernous, its walls echoing with memories of a life that no longer belonged to me. Yet in the midst of that emptiness, I discovered something unexpected: freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, worrying about his moods or his approval. The air was different, heavier with loneliness, yes, but also cleaner, lighter, as though the house itself sighed with me in his absence. Jasmine stayed close, visiting nearly every day, reminding me that I was not as abandoned as I felt. Meanwhile, Patrick slipped quickly into a new life. Through mutual friends and whispers that traveled faster than truth, I learned he was seeing someone younger, someone radiant and whole-bodied. Her name didn't matter. What mattered was the confirmation that his vows, his promises, his love had always been tethered to appearances. My heart clenched when I heard, but I refused to let bitterness devour me. I had secrets of my own, and they gave me quiet strength. The inheritance my grandmother had left sat untouched for years, a sum that Patrick never once knew about. He was always so eager to manage our finances, so convinced he controlled every decimal of our lives that he never thought to ask about money I might hold in my own name. That $100,000 was more than just wealth, it was dignity. It was proof that I was not powerless, not penniless, not broken in the way he assumed. I used it carefully. I hired a physical therapist to visit me at home not because I believed I'd walk again but because I needed to keep my body strong. I redesigned the downstairs of the house to be more accessible, turning the space into a sanctuary rather than a prison. Slowly, I even began to return to my art, painting canvases that bore the weight of my grief and the resilience that followed. Jasmine watched me one afternoon as I worked on a piece, bold strokes of color slicing across the canvas. "He thought he left you broken," she murmured. "But look at you, Mia Rose. You're creating again. You're alive. Alive." That word clung to me. For weeks I repeated it like a mantra. I was alive. Then, as though fate itself wanted to sharpen the lesson, Patrick returned to my doorstep. It was late spring, the trees blooming with reckless beauty, the kind of season that mocks sorrow by thriving anyway. I heard the knock and rolled to the door, my pulse quickening when I saw him standing there. He looked different, thinner, paler, his confident posture wilted. "Mia Rose," he said softly, almost pleading. I studied him, silent. He swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" I let him in, though every instinct screamed against it. He sat on the edge of the sofa like a man waiting for judgment. His eyes darted around the room, lingering on the changes I had made, the ease with which I maneuvered in my wheelchair. He seemed unsettled, as if he had expected ruin and instead found resilience. "I made a mistake," he began, his voice cracking. "I thought I wanted freedom, but it's empty without you. I was selfish, blind. I see that now." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "You see that now? After discarding me like trash? After parading around with someone else while I rebuilt my life from ashes?" His shoulders slumped. "I thought I couldn't handle it. I thought you'd drag me down. But look at you. You're stronger than ever. And I've lost everything." It was then he confessed what I had already guessed. The woman he left me for had abandoned him when his finances faltered. The market had shifted, his investments collapsed, and the illusion of success he clung to had crumbled in his hands. Now, without money, without love, without purpose, he came crawling back. And then, like a twist of fate, he finally learned the truth. Jasmine had been in the kitchen, preparing tea for us when she overheard his desperate pleas. She walked in, her voice sharp as glass. "You left her when you thought she had nothing. But the whole time, Patrick, she had more security than you ever did." Patrick's head snapped toward her, confusion clouding his face. "What are you talking about?" I met his eyes, calm and steady. "The inheritance. $100,000. My grandmother left it to me years ago. I never told you because I wanted to know if you loved me for me, not for what I could give you." Color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered, You had that all along?" "Yes." My voice did not waver. "And you chose to leave. You chose to abandon me when I needed you most. You failed the test, Patrick." His hands trembled as he reached for me. "Mia Rose, please." I was wrong. I see it now. I was blind, shallow, stupid. Please let me make it right. I can change. We can start again. I pulled back, shaking my head. "No, Patrick. Love is proven in the darkest hours. You showed me your truth when you left. And once that truth is revealed, it cannot be unseen." He buried his face in his hands, his body racked with sobs. The man who once exuded confidence, who believed himself untouchable, now sat broken before me. But the irony was cruel and clear. He had broken himself. As I watched him, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only clarity. The inheritance, the money, it wasn't about wealth, it was about worth. And worth, I realized, is not something another person can give or take away. It was always mine. Patrick's sobs echoed in the living room, raw and jagged, the sound of a man unraveling under the weight of his own choices. Once I would have rushed to him, held him, whispered comfort. But that version of me, the one who bent herself into shapes to protect his fragile ego, was gone. I sat still in my chair, the silence between us louder than his cries. He finally lifted his head, eyes swollen, face pale. "I was a fool, Mia Rose," he whispered. "I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. I let pride, fear, and selfishness destroy what we had. I can't live with that mistake." His words struck me, but they did not pierce me. They floated in the air, heavy with regret, but they could not undo the choices he made when my body was broken and my spirit cried out for love. He had abandoned me at my lowest. That truth would never be erased. "Patrick," I said, my voice calm, steady, almost foreign to my own ears, "you didn't just make a mistake. You revealed who you truly are. You showed me that your love was only for sunshine, never for storms. And I will not return to that kind of love." He leaned forward, desperation seeping from every pore. "I've changed. I swear I've changed. Losing you, losing everything, it's opened my eyes. Please let me prove it." I shook my head slowly, a bitter ache rising in my chest. "You want to prove it now? After the vows were tested and you failed? Love isn't about perfection in good times, Patrick. It's about loyalty when life is brutal. You left. You don't get to rewrite the story now that you're sorry." His hands trembled as he reached toward me, but I pulled back, the distance between us not measured in inches but in betrayal. He lowered his arms, defeated, his body collapsing into the sofa as though the weight of his regret was too much to bear. 4 days after his visit, he lingered on my doorstep, leaving flowers, letters, voicemails pleading for forgiveness. I listened to his words, read his scrawled apologies, but each one only reminded me of the night he chose freedom over love, selfishness over loyalty. Jasmine urged me not to even answer him. "He's only sorry because he lost his comfort," she said firmly. "Not because he truly understands what he did to you." Deep down, I knew she was right. The inheritance remained untouched, my silent guardian. But I no longer saw it as a test for Patrick. It was a gift for me, a chance to rebuild a life on my own terms. I invested carefully: therapy, adaptive tools, art supplies. I began teaching online classes, sharing my work with students across the country. Slowly, my name spread in circles I never imagined reaching, not as the woman abandoned by her husband, but as an artist who created beauty from brokenness. With every brushstroke, I carved out a new identity. Not Patrick's wife. Not a victim of circumstance. Simply Mia Rose. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the canvas in my studio, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I realized I no longer thought about Patrick every day. His absence no longer gnawed at me. He had become a shadow of my past, a lesson carved deep but no longer bleeding. When I heard months later that he had moved away, starting over in another city, I felt nothing but relief. His story was no longer tied to mine. He had gambled with love, and he had lost. I still remember the look in his eyes that day he learned of my inheritance. The shock, the hunger, the regret. He came back begging, but the door to us was already locked, bolted by his own betrayal. And by then it was too late. Now when people ask me about love, I tell them this: true love reveals itself not in champagne toasts or exotic trips, but in hospital rooms, in sleepless nights, in shattered dreams. It reveals itself when the world strips away comfort and leaves only the raw bones of commitment. Patrick failed that test. But I passed my own. I discovered strength I never knew I carried, resilience stitched into every corner of my being. And so I live now not with bitterness, but with clarity. My worth was never in his hands. It was always mine, hidden beneath scars and sorrow, waiting to be seen. Love tested him and found him wanting. Love tested me and made me whole. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to this channel for more stories.